Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Boston Public School Superintendent Search Committee. I'm co-chair Pam Ettinger, and because this is a remote session, I'm going to ask Ms. Liz Sullivan to please call the roll.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Present.
Mr. O'Neill? Dr. Pignato?
Present.
Mr. Roundtree?
Present.
Ms. Tang? Mr. Valenzuela? Dr. Ettinger?
Yes.
Ms. Lopera? Mr. McNeil?
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. So tonight's session is being shared live on Zoom, and it will be rebroadcast on Boston City TV and posted on the search committee's webpage, which is bostonpublicschools.org/soup-search. The committee is pleased to be offering live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Cabo Verdeano, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, Somali, French, Arabic, and American Sign Language. After our interpreters finish introducing themselves and providing Zoom instructions, we will activate the interpretation icon or the globe at the bottom of your screen. You may click the icon to select your language preference. So we will begin tonight with our Cantonese interpreter. Please introduce yourself and give Zoom instructions.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, Dr. Ettinger. Good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I'll be your Cantonese interpreter for the meeting today. 大家好，我係 Anna， 你今日嘅廣東話同步翻譯。一陣間你見到圖標嘅時候，請揀選 Chinese 撳落去，咁就去到廣東話嘅同步翻譯㗎啦。如果你需要去用手機嘅話咧，撳開3個點，再揀更多，再揀 Chinese， 亦都去到廣東話嘅同步翻譯㗎啦。唔該晒，一陣間見。Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our Mandarin interpreter, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ettinger. Hi, everyone. My name is Terry. I'll be your Mandarin interpreter. 大家好，我叫 Terry， 会是你们的国语翻译哈。待会你在屏幕下方会看到一个地球的图标，你点选地球的图标，然后再选择德语频道，你就可以听到普通话的翻译了。如果你是用手机或者是平板电脑上来的话呢，你可以点选屏幕下方的3个点，然后再选更多，也可以进入到德语，好，就可以听到普通话的频道了。好，谢谢大家 ，Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our Vietnamese interpreter, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is V. I will be your Vietnamese interpreter for today's meeting. Kính chào quý vị, tôi tên là Vi, tôi sẽ là thông dịch viên của quý vị ngày hôm nay. Xin quý vị nhìn vào màn hình và tìm quả cầu. Khi tìm thấy quả cầu thì bấm vào Vietnamese, tiếng Việt để có thể nghe được thông dịch viên dịch lại cho quý vị hiểu. Cảm ơn rất nhiều. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our Spanish interpreter, please.
Hello,
I'm sorry. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Dr. Ettinger. I do apologize. I was
Oh,
having a
that's
little
okay.
trouble.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Muy buenas noches, damas y caballeros. Mi nombre es Randolph Domínguez. Voy a ser su intérprete de español el día de hoy. Para acceder al idioma español, deben de buscar en su pantalla, en el fondo de su pantalla, un globo terráqueo. Allí van a pulsar y van a seleccionar el idioma español. Si por el contrario están ustedes utilizando una tableta o un celular, por favor buscar 3 puntos en su pantalla. Van a pulsar allí y van a seleccionar el idioma español como su idioma de preferencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now our Portuguese interpreter, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. Boa tarde para todos. My name is Juan Bernal. I'm the Spanish and Portuguese interpreter. I'll be interpreting in Portuguese tonight. Boa tarde a todos. Meu nome é Juan Bernal. Sou intérprete simultâneo de português, Para acessar o recurso da interpretação, encontre o globo localizado no canto inferior da tela e clique em português como seu idioma de preferência. Se você estiver se conectando a partir de um iPhone, tablet ou iPad, procure os 3 pontinhos na parte superior direita da tela e clique em português como seu idioma de preferência. A gente vai começar daqui a pouco. Muito obrigado pela tua presença. Back to you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our Cabo Verdean interpreter, please.
Good evening. My name is Armando Monteiro. I'm going to be your Cape Verdean interpreter for today. Boa noite. Meu nome é Armando Monteiro. A minha ser o intérprete de crioulo cabo-verdiano País Norte. Para você acessar nosso canal, vai na parte inferior do computador, onde você acha globo, faz clique sobre aquele pequeno globinho e você tem preferência de língua que é a língua crioulo cabo-verdiano. Muito obrigado. Boa noite. Thank you, guys. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And our Haitian Creole interpreter?
Thank you, Dr. Edenker. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sergio Saint-Hilaire, Haitian Creole interpreter. C'est un plaisir nous gagner pour nous avoir après-midi pour nous interpréter pour nous faire connaître que si vous besoin d'entrer dans la conversation, vous êtes capable de cliquer en bas écran là, ou après un globe et puis vous êtes capable d'entrer là-dedans. Et nous souhaitons d'ores et déjà bonne chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now our Somali interpreter.
Good evening. My name is Camila. I'm going to be a Somali interpreter for today. magacayga waa Camila fidnimo wanaagsan kusoo dhawaada caawashirkeena oo noo socda ayamahan isbuucyada noo socday oo lagu dooganayo maamulaha cusub ee iskuulka marka waxaad iga xiriirsan qolka Soomaaliga halkaas iska dhageysan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our French interpreter tonight.
Good evening. My name is Angel. I'll be your French interpreter tonight. Bonsoir tout le monde. Je m'appelle Angèle. Je serai votre interprète en français ce soir. Si vous voulez suivre la réunion en français, s'il vous plaît, allez au bas de votre écran. Vous allez voir l'icône de l'interprétation ou le globe. Vous cliquez sur le globe. Vous allez choisir la langue française. Si vous choisissez la langue française, vous serez en mesure de m'écouter directement. Vous interprétez la réunion directement en français. Merci et bonne écoute. Back to you, madame. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our Arabic interpreter.
Thank you, Dr. Edinger. Hi, everyone. My name is Ahmed Al-Rubai. I will be your Arabic interpreter today. مرحبا أنا اسمي أحمد الربيعي أنا مترجم اللغة العربية لهذا اليوم. بإمكانكم الاستماع إلى الترجمة باللغة العربية من خلال الذهاب إلى أسفل الشاشة. ستشاهدون علامة الكرة الأرضية. اضغط على هذه العلامة وستظهر لك اختيارات اللغات. قم باختيار اللغة العربية وعندها ستتمكن من الاستماع إلى الترجمة كاملة. شكرا جزيلا. Thank you.
Very much. And tonight, our American Sign Language interpreters are Michael Hirschberg and Sharon Mendez. So I would like to thank all of you for assisting us this evening, and we will now activate the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. I would like to remind everyone to please speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters tonight. Okay, now we will move to the approval of minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of April 12, 2022, last Tuesday, as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Seconded.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
You, Dr. Pignato,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Liz, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Mr. Roundtree.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Thank you. Tang. Mr. Valenzuela. Dr. Edinger,
Yes.
Ms. Lopera, Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
The minutes are approved unanimously.
Thank you very much. We will now move to public comments. The committee has set aside up to 15 minutes of tonight's agenda for public comments. I will now turn this over to Ms. Sullivan to conduct this process.
Thank you, Dr. Ettinger. The public comment period and opportunity, excuse me, that's my other job. The public comment period for today's meeting will be a total of 15 minutes. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Those who require interpretation services will receive an additional 2 minutes. Please click the raise hand button if you wish to speak. I will call on the speaker order in which hands are raised. Please state your name, affiliation, and what before you begin. We'll begin with Mr. John Mudd. Mr. Mudd, are you with us?
I think Mr. Mudd is muted.
Okay. Mr. Mudd, if you could please unmute and turn on your camera.
I can't believe this.
We can hear you.
You can hear me? I'm
Yes.
sorry, Liz. I for some reason I can't make it. Can you see me or do you mind if I go ahead?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I apologize. It's my clumsiness and I have a little tremor. So, okay, so my name is John Mudd. I'm a resident of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and a longtime education advocate in Boston. I want to reinforce Roxy Harvey's comments at the last search committee meeting about the importance of checking out the background, i.e. vetting the candidates. In my experience, BPS tends to put as much as 50% of the assessment of a candidate on the resume and 50% on the interview. That is insufficient and inadequate. What do parents think, especially parents of special education or English learner students? What do teachers think? The teachers union, Black or Latino or Asian teacher associations or caucuses? What about community organizations or foundations or university education school faculty? I've attached a fuller list of the kinds of groups that community members have found helpful in making these kinds of background checks to my testimony, which I hope that Liz has been able to distribute. We've seen this, such checkouts can give a more authentic sense of the strengths and weaknesses of a candidate and whether someone has the ability to deal with Boston's needs. Not to have this information can and has led to serious mistakes in hiring. We've seen this in past superintendent searches in Boston. We saw this yesterday in the article in the Globe about the turnover in leadership in the Office of English Learners. Roxy Harvey raised the vetting issue with your search firm consultant in the last search committee meeting. I'm sorry to say I was not reassured by the response. It still seemed to focus too much on video interviews and a superficial set of checkouts. I would plead with you to make sure you receive the kinds of thorough checkouts you need before making your recommendations to the mayor and the community, the finalist candidates who you judge to meet the needs of our students in BPS. Community groups have done these checkouts in the past. I hope they will do so again, but you should do it first. If you would, I just checked with the JT Consulting website and have one point of information that I'd like to raise with you if that's possible. Is it okay to give me 15 seconds?
Pam, is that okay? Yes.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I see on the website that the contract was approved on April 18th, yesterday. So I'm assuming the finalist proposals will be available soon. But on page 8 of the application, it says applicants are not to contact any members of the search committee. That's fine. But then it proceeds and says the final selection is the sole responsibility of the mayor. And unless there's been a change, I think the school committee has that responsibility, and you might want to correct it in the actual application process. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad. Anyone else who wishes to speak, please raise your hand virtually. Do we have anyone else who wishes to testify? Dr. Edinger, I'm not seeing any other hands.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. We will then now move on to the engagement portion of the search process update. Please bear with me. There is quite a bit of information, but I wanted to make sure that this is on the record for us, should we need to check back. Okay, so on engagement, the online superintendent survey closed last Friday on April 15th. In total, we received 507 responses to the survey. And the staff from the BPS Office of Data and Accountability will present to this committee a summary of the survey results at our April 26th meeting. That's next week. So that's about the survey. Now about the listening sessions. There are additional sessions that have been planned. The committee will hold a private listening session next week with the school leaders. And if you would remember, Ms. Sullivan has sent a link to a sign-up sheet. And we would like to have at least a couple of members at each one of these listening sessions. So please check the sheet and sign up as you can and as you're available. We are eager to hear directly from the community and our community-based organizations and create more opportunities for native language dialogue. We're working on scheduling additional small group listening sessions in other BPS home languages and with stakeholders from the various groups. And as I mentioned, Ms. Sullivan has sent out a link. Please sign up for these listening sessions. We also encourage groups who want to share feedback to host their own listening session and then send a summarizing memo to the search committee in our official email. Or you may invite search committee members who are available to attend and listen. So please contact us. So there are also other formats, again, for engagement. We are accepting video testimony and text submissions. And you may find a place to send the testimony on our search webpage, bostonpublicsschools.org/soup-search. Our email, again, is superintendentsearch@bostonpublicschools.org. And I really do want to reiterate that even though the leadership profile, or as we have been calling it, the job description, has been approved and posted, the committee welcomes continuous feedback from the community. We will use this information to help shape the interview questions and elements for the candidate selection. We also anticipate that the assembling of this information will be used by the incoming superintendent to inform their planning work. Any questions so far on the engagement front about the information that I have read into the records? Okay, not hearing any. I am pleased to report that the superintendent's leadership profile or job description is now posted. We went live on the BPS and the search committee websites today, and it was posted on the JG Consulting site yesterday. So any questions on that? If not, then I will proceed to our the main feature of tonight's meeting, which is a discussion about the search process moving forward with our executive search firm. I am happy to welcome Mr. Elton Fraley. Let me see if I can see him. Oh, there's Mr. Fraley, who is the Chief Search Officer with JG Consulting. And he will be supporting the BPS Superintendent search along with James Guerrero, whom you met last week. We've asked Mr. Fraley to come to us today to talk about the process moving forward Mr. Fraley, how can we help you get started?
Well, thank you for having us, Dr. Ellinger. I think James told you he would not be able to be here tonight due to some personal illness in the family.
Correct.
But thank you for having us. You've done a very thorough job of laying out the engagement process, which is, I think, probably the most critical. And I really applaud BPS for the additional steps they've taken in allowing folks to have their own meeting. It's in the summary to you, allowing the video and text testimony. I think those are some outstanding steps that are pretty unique. So I really appreciate that. As you said, the job has been posted on our website. Was visiting with an organization just this afternoon about getting it out to more candidates. It's posted on the BPS website now. So now we're going to be just letting folks apply that way. We'll be reaching out to other folks that we're aware of that fit the description pretty well. And just continue with the engagement. The engagement process is very important. We need folks to take ownership of this. We need folks to be very transparent in the process as well. The key thing is just as candidates are applying, we'll be briefing the board. I know he gives weekly updates to the board or to the committee of where we are, and we're right on schedule. The April through May is the timeline that we have for the applicants to review the information. That has started. We'll be hearing from candidates, and we're reaching out to candidates. If anyone becomes aware of some candidates they want to take a look at, just contact the firm. We do take referrals. A question about the vetting was raised, which is a very important part of it. Some of it may not be in the early steps to the degree that the gentleman was speaking about, but we certainly reach out to as many parties as possible to vet the candidates. And because of the public interview process as well, that creates another opportunity to have additional vetting of candidates because we don't want to hire someone that should not have been hired. But I think we'll cover all those bases pretty well this time around. Let's see what else is here.
So Elton, if I may, Mr. Fraley, we meet every Tuesday from 5:30 to 6:30, and we know that that provides us with a certain pacing, right, in the way that we're going to be doing our work. Next Tuesday, we will have a survey presentation, but I'm also expecting that next Tuesday, we will begin to talk about training for the search committee on protocol. Correct? And that JG will facilitate that training on the do's and don'ts, on referrals, right, on reference checking, and what are the guidelines on those pieces. So I would imagine that training may go past one session. So this coming Tuesday, the next Tuesday will be the survey presentation. And then the Tuesday after that, if that is the training, we may go a full session on that. Would that be a good estimate?
Estimate correct. I think so. And we'll make certain that we have Lizzie Carroll, who's our chief of staff here as well. Yes. Make certain that JG knows what's being expected and the firm will be ready to deliver what you need.
And then the session, the Tuesday session after that, so a third session after this one, I would expect that we would begin working on, you would lead us to begin deliberating on our interview questions, and that would happen in executive session.
Right.
Right, and the detailed discussions on that. And I just wanted to make sure that our search committee members know, and we will send out a prompt on these dates, on these Tuesday dates, and what is expected at those meetings. So you will come in knowing that we're going to be doing a certain kind of work every time we come together. Is it pretty clear that once we begin deliberating on interview questions, we'll likely be pretty much in continuous executive sessions, except for the reporting back at the beginning of the meeting?
That is possible. I think key is once we have the profile, we have the description.
Yes.
The survey results will be critical. The ongoing feedback we get from community stakeholders will be important because we'll be developing questions designed to identify candidates that best fit those expectations.
Right.
So this will be ongoing.
Right. And the last bullet on my checkbox is that you and staff, or JG Consulting and our staff, will hold our search committees for blocks of dates or blocks of time, during which we will be doing the first level and second level screening of candidates. So I wanted our team around the table here, our search team around the table, to know that Liz and the folks working with her will begin to reach out, so that we can coordinate those dates ahead of time. It seems early, but it's not really, because I know how tight everybody's calendars are, particularly towards the end of the semester and the beginning of summer plan. So I want to be sensitive that we are all together on planning those dates. If it's okay with you, Mr. Freely, I'm going to open this up to our search committee members if they have particular questions, if they want to probe at this a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Roxy, I see your hand.
You know, it is good to be seen. Dr. Edinger, it is a good thing to be seen. It is something that many of us seek. I was wondering, because I am looking at the job on your JG Consulting and the page that talks about, you know, what is expected, including submission and basically the verifications that the candidates have to acknowledge. And maybe I'm missing it. So I'm just curious about at what point, and this goes back to last week's session with Mr. Guerra, where, because I don't want to get to a point where we're in executive session, we have all this information, and the same thing I asked for previously is still not there, which is how they engage with organizations such as mine, CPACs in their previous districts, whether it's an English language group or other community groups. But on here, I don't see anything that has them verified that they understand that these type of organizations will also be providing feedback on them. I don't see anything that even asks them to perhaps list some of these types of community and family groups they've worked with. So therefore, I'm not sure how when Mr. Guerra said, yes, we'll do that, how that happens if I don't see any indication on this document that that's the expectation that will be looked into for the candidates. So could you clarify that point for me, please?
Sure. Thanks for the question. As we move forward with this committee, those types of things with the candidates, will speak specifically to them at that time, saying, if you're going to be considered for an interview, these questions or this must be addressed. And so that'll be something that it'll be constantly tailored as the committee moves forward with expectations. What we put up there is it's a generic, but it has some specific steps, but other steps will be added as the committee deems necessary and appropriate. And so what we'll ask for is come prepared to the interview committee to respond to these concerns, these questions.
So if I could just clarify what I'm asking, because that's a little bit different than what I'm asking. That is prepared to discuss how you've worked and tell me what you've done. I'm asking about a verification process. So instead of me asking Mr. Fraley, how have you worked with special ed families and families in your district? How have you worked with superintendents? I'm going to the superintendents you've worked with us, and I'm saying, how did he work with you? How did he engage with you? How did you think his process was? So it's a little bit different than them just telling me about it. I'm also asking about feedback from those organizations or those individuals to get a perspective, an additional perspective to add to the whole packet as I'm considering them as an entire candidate.
One of the processes that's available to the committee is a site visit to the home district of the applicants. And during that process, what I've seen done is the board says, we want to see these folks who come to your town to visit. So that is a process that can be afforded, can be asked for by the search committee.
Is that a standard process, or that's one that has to be specifically added in?
That is not always done by every district, but if that's what you want, it's done by some. If that is what you want, that can be added to this process.
Right. And I think in some ways when we begin going through training and protocol, which I think it's important for a group to agree on what that's going to be as we proceed forward. That is something that should be on the table to talk about. How do you want to get to those sources, right, at the candidate's home site? Roxy, it may be that if you're interested in, let's say, we know that we're interested in 3 or 4 different topics or 3 or 4 different engagements with community groups for the superintendent, that we ask them to list those points. And we ask every candidate to list those points, right? So that we can be fair across the board. It is, I've been to home site visits. And you can ask them to assemble whatever it is that they want to assemble. So maybe it's something that this committee needs to keep in mind. What are those groups that we want, right? We understand that there's an interest in English language learners or multilingual learners. We know that there's an interest in students with disabilities, and there may be 1 or 2 others that, so maybe we compile that list and offer it to JG and say, go do the research, or have folks come ready, right? So that they will have places where the reference checkers can tap into. Is that closer to what you were looking for, Roxy?
Yes, the home site with individuals from the various groups that can speak for themselves and give that feedback is exactly what I'm referring to, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. All right, so when we do the training and the protocol, if I can ask our JG colleagues to make that a point, however, if you have a strategy to address that, or if there's specifics that you want to bring to the table. What we don't want to happen in the training and the protocol is for the committee to scatter, right? Or for folks external to the committee to scatter, because we want to make sure that the stream of information comes back here, right? So that we can share and deliberate. Dr. Pignato, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. So this is for JG Consulting. I'm wondering, do you have a checklist or internal criteria that you'll be using against the job description to determine which candidates will advance to the general interview process? And do you have a system to communicate with the committee which specific candidates were not considered and why?
Yes, we do. We have an internal staff meeting to look at all the candidates and their materials. And then we may create kind of a list of those we feel seem to be more tightly aligned with the job description. And we may bring that list to you all, but we bring every candidate to the committee. You review every candidate to the degree that you wish to. If you want to look at every candidate's video, you may. If you don't want to look at all the videos, just pick the ones you want, but they'll be available to everyone to look at all of them. But yes, we have an internal process where we look at the candidates, the search team does. We generate what we feel are those that are more tightly aligned with the process or with the job description. But we bring every candidate's information to the full committee for their decision making about who they want to actually bring in or not. Can I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And is this something we could have access of maybe during the training, so that in case we have any input to share, so that we can customize it specific to Boston?
Absolutely, absolutely. As we talked to you all about the protocols and process, if there's anything you guys have in mind you want to have done, just let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions floating around? And I'm sure we will have more as we proceed. It is a complex road to travel. I think our advantage is that we've had people who's done it for other districts and have done well, and we also have a great deal of I think wisdom and logistical as well as content wisdom around this table. So I'm really looking forward to getting this done the right way. And hopefully it will be the last search committee I'm on for the rest of my life. This is great service, but we do want to land a great candidate. And I would ask committee members, if you have questions after the meeting, to send them ahead. We can surface them at our next meeting so we can get them answered. Or if they are logistical in any way, we can ask staff to facilitate that answer for you. We don't want you sort of sitting and wondering. we want to sort of nail some of these things down. Mr. Fraley, have we touched all the pieces that you want to touch?
I think we have. I'm looking at my notes here. I made a few notes earlier. The point you made about being careful about having each committee member scatter and doing their own work, we really caution against that, because a lot of candidates that you want to look at, they have a good job already, and some will apply. Many will have to be recruited, but if there becomes too much noise around that search process, many will not participate any further. So we've got to be very careful to stick to the protocols and guidelines that you've laid out as well.
Okay, that's terrific. And if there are no immediate questions, I want to turn back to.
I think I see one more, Dr. Pignado.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that an old hand or a new hand?
It's an old hand, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. All righty.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I kind of, we still have a little bit of time and I will try to give folks back, some minutes if I can, if we wrap early. But what I want to do is to get down that first date that we talked about the last time we were together. We had talked about being able to be in person for at least half a day together on the week of May 16th, but not the 16th and not the 17th. So somehow amongst the 9 of us, or however many of us there are around the table today, we need to identify either the 18th, the 19th, or the 20th to be together to review the initial submission. I think they are, Mr. Fraley, if I remember correctly, they're sort of initial video interviews. Is that what they are?
We have, we'll get all the paper documentation. Then there is what's called a modern hire video,
right?
Where each candidate will respond to the questions that you all agree upon, and we'll have the video available because the application deadline closes May 13th.
Right, and we'll
begin our. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the last time we were together with James, he had talked about the fact that it's probably a good idea for us to be in person. Yes. For maybe 3 or 4 hours in a block to review what has been submitted, correct?
Correct.
So I'm eager for the folks around the table, the search committee members around the table tonight, to know that we need a block of time from you, either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, to do this work. Michael's got his hand up. Can't hear you, sir. Here we go.
Thank you, Dr. Edinger. I'm sorry, I had put my hand up just as you started the conversation about this scheduling, so I apologize.
Okay.
Because it was more to your open call for questions, and it's more response to what Mr. Fraley was getting at a little bit. And thank you, sir, for joining us today. Could you just expand a little bit? You started to talk about concerns of candidates, right? Because it's a very sensitive time when you encourage candidates to apply, particularly sitting superintendents of other districts. And so I'm sure, just as we are quizzing you about process, the candidates are as well, and they're keenly interested in the confidentiality of their application, at least to the point of if they become a finalist, and then it obviously is public. But could you just talk to me for a moment, please, about how candidates ask you about that process and the risk of that confidentiality, either inadvertently or I guess the opposite would be advertently or intentionally being breached, and the repercussions both to a potential candidate and, quite frankly, to the district. So could you just expand a little bit about that, please, from a candidate viewpoint?
Having been on that side before and never really pursuing a job, but being pursued for jobs, communities hate to feel that you're wanting to leave them. And if your name gets out of that, you're pursuing a position, that's one thing that is not looked upon very favorably in communities, because at some point along the way, you may decide, or there may be a decision that there's not a love connection with the new district. and then you want to stay. Well, there could have been some damage done that can't be repaired because communities hate to feel rejected. They've invested in you and you become a leader of the community. So they don't want to feel like they're being rejected. Candidates are very concerned about being pursued because they want to know how, as you point out, confidential can this process be? As I said, I think during the first interview we had with you all, that we want to be an advocate for Boston Public Schools and be able to explain the process is very tight. And so the caution that Dr. Edinger put out there about community members scattering doing their own research and whatnot, and even in the process of vetting, you really can't engage in the superintendent's community with various groups outside the process and expect that to stay confidential. And it really becomes a political hot potato when word gets out that someone is either being pursued or worse, pursuing. If you're being pursued and then there's no love connection by either side, the way that can be spun is, they didn't want you, why should we keep you? So it really creates some challenges for them. And again, these are folks who are doing a great job. And the only misstep perhaps is allowing themselves to be looked at by another potential suitor. So this is very, very sensitive, and I can't stress enough. If you want to have, and it's not just for this search, it's for future searches as well. Because a reputation is gained by either they were very professional, very confidential, you will have better candidates consider you. If for any reason they begin to feel that there's some risk for them in terms of the search process, in terms of the lack of confidentiality, that's going to harm who will even talk to us about coming to BPS. Right. So I can't stress enough how critically important it is that this remains as very confidential as possible. We've done searches in places where every candidate's name goes into the newspaper. In those searches, I've yet to find a sitting quality superintendent ever allow themselves to be considered. We've hired a lot of quality deputies and assistant superintendents, but in Boston, you really need some experience. You really run the risk of not getting quality candidates if there's any fear of confidentiality being violated. I can't stress that enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roxy, I think your hand's up.
It is up, actually.
I'm getting better at this.
Yeah, day by day, step by step. I really want to acknowledge and respect the privacy and also the knowledge that when people in general at many positions seeking another employment, you don't want your boss to feel you're not committed to your current job. But I also hope you also emphasize and understand the urgency of when we're getting down to finalists and we're really looking for someone to fit Boston, we do need to speak to these constituents that they work with and engage with. So not cherry-picked people that they're like, oh, this one person likes me, or I did them a favor, but real community people from their previous districts. And I put an S on that, right? Not just one. So I hope you have that same urgency, but when we get to that point of talking up to the list of different groups that are imperative to Boston, that are maybe parallel in other districts, that we must also, and when I say us, I mean, JG Consulting, you're giving us a summary of what individuals have also said, you know, whether it's you're picking up the phone and you're like, okay, it's just like when the state comes into Boston, they don't go, give me the people who are gonna say only nice things about Boston Public Schools. Let's tell the truth. What has your experience been is what we're looking for. So I really hope you understand that imperative also, as we also value and respect the need for confidentiality with the understanding when you come down to the finalists, you know, it's time to put your cards on the table. If you're committed to this job and you're going all in, then you're going all in. My second, that is a comment on the confidentiality thing, which I think we all respect and understand. My other question was where we started to transition to the day, talking about the block of time. And I know Mr. Guerra said, yes, it's best to do it in person. He also said that there might be ways to do it in a hybrid format. Because I'm thinking when you say 3 hours, transportation wise, that's really 4 hours. To me, that's babysitters, that's time off from work. That's a lot of other variables that if some of this can really be done virtually, I want to hear why it has to be in person, what components of it besides, I'm going to hand you an iPad. Well, you know what? Drop it off on my porch. I know how to work iPad from home or from an office or home in front of people. So I just want to hear about the hybrid option and why, if you're saying that hybrid option doesn't work effectively, I'd like to know what components of it require every piece of that 4-hour block to be in person, so I can understand that better.
That second part question for the firm, JG Consulting, or just for in general?
No, that's what JG Consulting, because it was Mr. Guerra who said that, you know, he thought it was better in person, and we're taking that advice. And he mentioned the iPads, and I don't know what's going to be on the iPads, but he mentioned giving an iPad or something, and the way it's done. So this is for me trying to understand, like, what is the hybrid option he was referring to? And I know that I'm asking you about what someone else said, but it's part of the process of what he was describing for your agency, that your agency does. So I hope you're familiar with what he's referring to.
Yes, we did this process with Austin ISD. Matter of fact, the big concern with the iPads is there's so much information about the candidates on that iPad that if we send out in advance, that creates a risk for the confidentiality loop. Okay, and that's just our standard understanding. It's not a criticism of you guys at all. It's just understanding that the more information you put out there that's in an uncontrolled or environment, the greater the risk. And so the hybrid option would be some in person with the iPads, perhaps some virtually without the iPads. Now, that's just me just kind of speculating, because the idea that providing the iPads with all the information does create a risk to the confidentiality loop. That's all that is.
So why don't we do this? Regardless of whether we're going to be in person or hybrid, we will still need to block the time. Why don't we go ahead and block the time, and then we can determine what is the best way to proceed to that will be the best for the most amount of folks around the table. And rather than trying to decide what we want here, we hear you, Roxy. I hear you. That it is that travel and and trying to arrange everything else around your life.
It's not just travel, it's me wanting to understand the process better, you know, just to say that, hey, the iPad has information about a candidate on it. I mean, okay.
So what we used to do quite a few searches ago is that we actually sat around the table, looked at folders and information, and then we handed back the material to the consultant. So we kept nothing. When we did interviews, if we took notes, we gave the notes back. So when you come and go from a meeting, you're literally taking away nothing except what's on your brain. It is one way of keeping the least amount of free floating information available, and it is not a matter of trust between members across, you know, the search committee or even anything like that. It is just the availability of the information in physical form is a risk, and I think it's risk mitigation more than anything else. But we also want to be, you know, mindful about folks traveling, and I think your point about, you know, getting a chunk of the day and wasting 2 hours of it on traveling is valid. So I hope that helps with the understanding of why they have wanted to meet in person. We're trying to mimic the returning of all the paper at the end of the day process, and keeping control over the confidential applications.
Let me respond to the first part of her concern. At some point, absolutely, candidates know their name is going to get out there.
Yep.
And at that point is when we will certainly be looking at having those conversations with the folks that you were referencing. Well, certainly. Dr. Carranza, another colleague, has his hand up, and also Rich, he's joined us here.
Yes,
you can speak now.
Thank you, Alton. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you this evening. If I could just add to what my colleague Alton Fraley has said, look, Boston is Boston. So in the world of education, there are certain, I would say, districts that just stand out in terms of who they are, what they represent, the diversity. It's Boston. So there are a number of sitting superintendents, very experienced superintendents with successful track records that are going to be interested in Boston because it's Boston. So in order to get them to be interested and apply and go through the process, of confidentiality has to be maintained, because for them to even step out puts them at risk in their current districts. Now, that being said, everyone understands that at a certain point, when you are in the final circle of finalists or semifinalists, there's a lot of conversations we're going to do with just those community-based organizations, those advocacy groups, those special interest groups, to understand, we know what your resume is, but what's the word on the street? How have you worked with African-American parents? How have you worked with special education parents? How have you worked with English language learner parents? That's part of the work that we do in order to make that happen. So I just want to assure you that, even I, as a superintendent, being part of a search and my name was leaked, I withdrew immediately. It's just not okay to have them go through that until they're in the final stages. The second point that I would make, and Ms. Harvey, you have a very good point. Why do we do it in person? So I'm going to be very, very blunt about this. This is a relationship. The committee and the mayor will work hand in hand with the next superintendent to take on some very challenging issues. In an urban system, there are challenging issues. You have to be able to sit next to that person, look them in the eye, get that nonverbal, and understand, is this somebody that I can work with? Is this somebody that I believe what's on paper is actually being illustrated in person? Is this somebody I can talk to? Is this somebody that has the credibility to stand by what it says on paper? So in many cases, sure, we can use technology. I think the last 2 years have shown us we can use technology, but this is a special working relationship where you're actually transforming the lives of children in Boston. You have to be able to have time in person to know, is this somebody that I can actually trust and work with and hire as our next superintendent? I call it the eHarmony effect, right? Do you know it's the right person or not? That would be one of the major reasons that I would say some component of in-person interaction is going to be critically important for you to make your decision as to who you would want to go with.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, you have your hand up. Hey, baby, I hope you're feeling better. Oh, boy.
Thanks. Yeah, no apologies. Turns out he has an ear infection, so that's why I was late. It's waiting for his prescription. So I apologize. I came into this a little late, but I think what I picked up and where I thought we'd left off last week is that we were going to pick some in-person dates. Is that being revisited? Is that what I'm understanding? No, okay, because and Roxy, I apologize. I kind of caught the latter half there. But based on my experience with all of this too, I agree with Mr. Fraley and Mr. Carranza. And, having worked with many a superintendent now, and honestly being on the opposite end where oftentimes I get calls about potential superintendents in other places and the need for confidentiality, et cetera. But I do think that being in person, there is something to it that makes a difference. And so I would hope that we are going to be meeting with folks in person. And honestly, I'm wondering when we're going to start meeting in person too, because I actually think that's important as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a request then for my colleagues around the table. Take a look at that Thursday time. And regardless of whether we're going to be in person or we're going to be in Zoom with whatever modality that we're going to, that we land on, that will protect the confidentiality of the materials as well as the candidates, we're going to need that block of time to be together, right? So see if that works for you.
And that was what I missed. Actually, I forgot my whole question. What
So we're looking at May 19th from 8:30 to 1:30. I know that's a large period of time. Maybe we can settle for 8:30 to 12:30. But it's the largest span of time that I can think of that we would need. I picked that time just because,
Okay.
if you have another block of time that may work better for you, we're looking at the end of that week rather than the beginning of that week.
Okay, sorry, and you're talking about Wednesday?
May. This is May.
Wednesday, May 18th.
Right.
Okay, got it.
So we're looking at actually, no, Thursday, May 19th.
Oh.
Right. So, or Friday. Is 19th a problem for anyone at this point that you can tell? Friday is better for Roxy.
So my hand is not up left over like Mr. Carranza and Ms.
Oh,
Tang.
okay.
My hand is up new.
All right, we'll get
I'm
back.
just waiting.
We'll get back to you again.
I'll put my hand down. Okay, so that's the date we're looking at. Yeah, so the 19th works much better for me too.
Okay. All right.
So, I'm sorry, the 20th, not the 19th, not the Thursday. Yeah,
all right. So okay. All right, so we have a handful of folks for whom the 20th is better. Let's then take this offline now that we know the general parameters of either Thursday or Friday. Is Saturday ever a problem for folks, Saturday mornings? Does that ease your stress, or does it just make it more stressful? Just in general, because we're going to be going into blocks of time for, the second level interviews and everything else. First and second level interviews. So is Saturday usually a not okay time for folks? All right, hearing nothing, I'm going to go to Roxy for a minute and then we're going to go to Michael. Roxy?
I just wanted to address the direction, because it seems as if it's making it seem as if I don't believe in coming in person. I asked specifically what we're doing on that 3-hour block.
Right.
And if it's just looking at iPads and looking at things, to me, it's different meeting a candidate and talking to a person in person. For meeting candidates to get a vibe and to really hear what people are saying, that's separate for me, because that is imperative. But if you're telling me the only reason you want me to come together is to look at pieces of paper or look at an iPad, that I want to discuss. So my clarifying question then is, on the 19th or 20th, whatever date it is that the date where candidates will actually be there and we will be interviewing candidates? Or is that where it's looking at 20 resumes, et cetera, CVs, and narrowing down? What is that 3-hour block date actually for?
So, Mr. Fraley, it sounds to me that this is a process in the olden times that we used to call paper screening.
Correct.
Right? You would receive 30, 40 resumes and you would boil them down for us. We come together and we do what we call a paper screen.
Correct.
By which you sort out who you want to see in person. Is that the process we're talking about? Okay.
That's correct.
So, does that help, Roxy, as paper screening?
Yes, defining what will actually occur is helpful. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Michael, did you have something about that piece of information that you need clarified?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Edge. And then I have to apologize to my fellow members. I have to excuse myself right after this to get to a sunset memorial service that I was
sorry.
So no worries, I apologize. But I just want to echo the importance, as much as we're trying to move to new technologies, there are probably 2 or 3 times that I think are going to be critical for us to be together in person because of the interactions, the way we share, the way we talk it through. Ms. Tang referenced it because she and I have done this together in the past, of when we sit in that room and do that paper screening and really kind of talk through the candidates. And I do just find it invaluable when you're in that room and talking, and someone's going to see something that you're not. And someone's going to bring out, but what about this viewpoint? What about that viewpoint? And I just think it is harder to do it in this bubble that is the Zoom window. And then the 1 to 2 rounds when we're meeting candidates in person, I think are also absolutely critical because of that sense of, it's just as much the body language when you're talking to a candidate and getting to know them and saying, do you see this person as superintendent? So to our 3 co-chairs, I know you're trying to minimize as much as possible the times we are in person, but I just do think it is critical those times to do it in person. And so when you're shooting for large blocks of time to be able to tackle a lot all at once, so we're not doing it multiple times, I think that is great. But I'll defer to the full will of the co-chairs. And again, I apologize, but I have to get to a memorial service. So
thank you, Michael.
See you all next week.
Okay. And again, my goal today is not so much to completely resolve the question of do we need to be in person or can we do some hybrid piece. I'm concerned that we all block that time one way or the other because we're going to need it. So those of you who are good with Saturdays, we will keep that for future consideration as we schedule those 2 other events. So just to be clear, we have the major events that we're going to run into as we go from here will be the presentation next week of the survey. The week after, we will do the training of the committee on protocol. And hopefully at that time, we also lock down schedules. The next piece after that is going to be the piece that is going to happen either on the 19th or the 20th in a block of time of paper screening, where we take a large pool of candidates down to the candidates that we want to see at the first level interview. The next piece that happens is the first level interview and our discussion and our sorting out who is going to be in our final interview. Right, so those are the major benchmarks that we have. We may do some of them on our Tuesday meetings. We may have to lock down other block of time if we have candidates coming into town, or if we decide to gather in times differently than Tuesday evening. All right, but we will keep our Tuesday meetings as check-ins or reporting back to the community on engagement. And we will keep them to an hour, kind of like today. Is that any questions about that trajectory? Jessica, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure that's right. So we were holding the Tuesdays 5:30 to 6:30. We're holding hopefully the 20th, not the 19th.
Okay.
In person. I saw several other people say that worked better, so I'm hoping that we can go to 20th. And then are there any other dates that we need to hold? Because I do think, especially for this group, scheduling is really hard.
There are. I think there are 2 sets of dates that we need to hold. We need to hold a set of dates that's for the first round interview.
Okay.
Right? So let's say we choose 8. That's just a number I'm landing on. Let's say we choose 8 in the first round. We're going to need 2 days, right, for that first round, the first level interview. We're going to need a set of dates for the second or final interviews.
Okay. But we have not, those dates have not been identified for holds yet.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I can ask for the assistance of our staff to poll the committee so that we can identify those dates between now and maybe in the next week or so. Because
right. I think that'd be great to just have those dates held sooner rather than later and before next Tuesday, ideally.
Right, because once we have those dates, it will be easier for JG to alert the candidates or the various levels of candidates that's going to be coming up, because they will then have to hew to those days. So we don't have to change our calendar for the incoming candidates schedule. So we will hold our calendar and the candidates will work to our calendar. So it'll be easier to manage. Correct, Elton? Am I getting that piece right? Okay.
If they want the job, they'll be there.
Yeah, that's what I figured. But we don't want the folks around this table to be juggling. So, okay, something happened. Anyways, I don't want to keep folks any longer. We will send out notices and through our staff. Terrific. Oh, I'm sorry. One more. I do see your hand now. Go ahead. Go ahead, Roxy.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check. So all the closed executive sessions will happen on other days. None of them will occur on the Tuesdays. That will be open. That will stay. The Tuesdays will stay open for whether community feedback or updates, etc. Is that accurate?
So on the Tuesday, on the Tuesdays, we will begin in open session, and then we will retire into executive session. During the open portion of our meeting, which are required for public meetings, we will report on progress, because that needs to be, we're doing the public's business, and then we will take public comments. Right, so those are the 2 public pieces that we usually do in the beginning. And then the whole group then will go into executive session, and we will dismiss the meeting from executive session. We will not reconvene again. Does that make sense? You're welcome. Okay, thank you for putting up with me tonight. And we will get communications out there to lock down dates. Thank you for being patient with me on trying to get all of these things to work. Thank you for being with us, our JG team, and we'll see you next week, next Tuesday. And I think what we need to do is to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Hey, Liz, can you call roll?
Yes. Ms. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill, Dr. Pignato,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Ms. Tang,
Yes.
Mr. Valenzuela, Dr. Edinger,
Yes.
Ms. Lopera, Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Expect
Everyone, thank you all.
emails. We'll sort stuff. Thank you so much. Have a good night.